We're live. Hello, this is Martin Cross. This is Cross's Corner. And you will notice I have an incredible man who feel so honoured to have as guest tonight, Steve Gladstone. I think, can I call you?
Sorry, Martin.
Yeah, technology. Steve, can I call you emeritus coach at Yale? Currently, is that what...
if you like? There's no formal title, but I'll accept that that moniker.
What is it about you and Yale? Because I know you're incredibly proud of what you've done there. It's just one of the many universities which you've coached at over your career. Is there a special fondness for Yale?
Well, you know what? Let's see, Martin. This is what I would say. I'm very, very proud of the young men that have raced for Yale over these past, 12 years, 13 years. We had two that were shut down, the COVID years, Yale shut.
Yeah.
But no, I feel very, very fortunate to have coached so many of those young men. Clearly developing, supporting, encouraging athletes is something that gives me enormous satisfaction and pleasure. And I went to Yale when the athletic director called, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to be an advising trip. In other words, talking to the athletic director about who I thought the good young coaches would be.
Yeah.
But I got there and I walked around, spent time there, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Martin, but it's the mother church. It's where American collegiate rowing began. The boat club began in 1843, and it's been going since. And for a long period of time, there were a few crews in the last 60 years or so at Yale. There were a few crews that were distinguished, but it was lukewarm for those years, and it was hard as an outsider to figure out why it was that way. And I thought once I was there and walked around, it's also a very beautiful place. Crossy, it would remind you of Oxford.
Yeah.
They have the the residential colleges and so forth and so on. And I just thought this would be a great challenge. The whole idea of the 4-mile race was new to me, and and that seemed to be a really interesting and compelling part of it. So I was drawn to it, and it took a few years to get it going, but it's been a very, very warm and satisfying experience.
One thing, because I'm trying to understand American collegiate rowing a little bit more, is that do the schools on the West Coast, like Cal and Washington, have an inbuilt advantage over Ivy League schools like Yale or Harvard because they're not so governed by the scores that kids have to get in exams before they get there? So are the East Coast schools rowing with one hand behind their back, or have I got that wrong?
No, Crossy, I think that's correct to a large measure. Having coached at Cal and having loved my time there as well, it's a very different circumstance. The academic threshold is, if you're coaching at particularly Yale, Princeton, or Harvard, is very, very high. And so there are an awful lot of very good people, bright guys that you would like to recruit that you simply can't for the academic reasons. And of course, rowing, being able to row year round is great. But sort of a follow up to that. Yeah, there's no question those situations. I mean, to give you an example of what you how would you what you said, when Yale won the team trophy in 2022, that was the first time in 15 or 16 years that a crew other than Cal or Washington had won it. But all that being said, Crossy, you go to race and you race, and and if you're doing your job well, the athletes have a sense of giving what they have, on a given race day, and from time to time, these crews can race on an even footing with the Cals and Washingtons of the world.
Well, you had some amazing athletes, because I know we looked at the list of Yale athletes that must have been in your crews, like 2017, 18, 19.
And some of them, like Ollie, were in 2015 as well. 2015, 2016. Ollie
Wynne Griffiths. So the list is quite. I can't imagine that there are many more universities. You talked of Ollie Wynne Griffith in the British pair, who probably end up with the Olympic medal. His opposition, Andre Gulick, who will probably end up with a medal. Dan Williamson, who's already got a gold medal from the New Zealand team. Simon Keenan, who's doing really well in Australia, as is Fergus Hamilton, both from Yale. And then you've got Elwes and Digby in the British 8 with Sholto Carnegie. And I think there's one. It's interesting. There's one US guy, Nick Rusher. But I mean, that's a sensational list. To have coached those guys. I mean, how do you view when you see those guys racing, in terms of your role in that, I guess?
Well, I think that some of those people had big reputations before they arrived at Yale. Certainly Tom Digby did, and certainly Charlie Elwes did. The Sholto, I think Sholto, if you look at the records, his most distinguished performance was, in the junior quad, the British junior quad, where they finished second to last in the third level finals. Sholto was not identified as a major recruit.
What was he doing there then?
What's that?
What was he doing there?
He came on an official visit, and I thought this guy is going to be an Olympian. It was his passion for the sport was obvious, and it wasn't feigned. There was nothing. Very often that process, the recruit will say, "Oh, coach, I really hate to lose," blah 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 blah. With Sholto, his drive was palpable, but with Charlie and Tom, they were known entities. Ollie had a good rowing career, and he was somebody we wanted very much, and I was very moved by Ollie because he came to Yale prior to Yale being fast.
Oh, really?
And Ollie could have gone to any school in the U.S. I mean, he could have gone to Princeton, he could have gone to Harvard, and he chose Yale. And for that, I'll be ever grateful.
Yeah.
So we could go down each one of those guys, but what happens, Martin, is that people's reputation grows from their successes. And there are probably a number of people that were in less successful collegiate programs in the US that had the same ability as the people we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it was a great experience. There was a lot of work, a lot of ups and downs in the process, but it brought out the best in the athletes. It brought out the best in me and the people who were assisting me, and it was a very good period of life. And I miss it very much. I still feel very attached to that squad, and yet at the same time, I have to keep my distance for obvious reasons. Mike has to be able to do his work without somebody leaning over his shoulder. So, and I have confidence that Mike will develop and keep things riding high at Yale.
Yeah. I guess one of the things, you were a really obvious choice, or one of the obvious choices for whcih Verdonschot to say, could you take the US men's 8 on last year?
Mm-hmm.
How do you look at that project now with a bit of distance?
From a distance, at the time, whcih asked me if I would like to be involved, and I felt, how would you say? I felt that I ought to bring my resources to it, and it was in the beginning. It was my understanding that the 8 would be prioritized, and whcih said that would be contingent upon the performance of the straight 4 in one of the World Cups, and that straight 4 turned out to be a very good straight 4. And what it was is working like any coach, working to refine what they were doing. Their rowing, that was an important piece to it, and to sort of work the psychology of them understanding that they have the potential to be very fast. But mostly that was it. It's a very rushed period. Selection in July, 3 weeks of training up in Hanover, then over to Varese, and then literally the first competition for that 8 was at the World Championships. And I think by and large, we would have liked to see, I think the crew is probably capable of going 2 or 3 seconds faster. They did well in their opening heat. They had the fastest 1,000-meter time. And clearly, more racing would have been to our advantage. It's also, I like very much when I'm coaching 8s, I like to have them row straight 4s. And we really couldn't get out of that group, we couldn't get 2 straight 4s that could go nose to nose. So I think it made the training probably less dynamic. Than it would be if we could have done those things. But I feel good. I think in this year's 8, a Yale guy is back in the boat, Nick Rusher. I think is not the right word. There's the new people in that 8 rounded out very, very nicely. And my feelings about it is that I would have liked to have seen a better performance in the world. But what was it, Crossy? It was what? Between first and last, it was 4.5 seconds. And I can't help but think that with a little bit more racing, let's say if we'd gone to a World Cup or 2 prior to the championships, we probably could have done better. Might have gotten a bronze. Who knows? but that's really not that important. What's important is that that group has been strengthened. There were some good guys that have strengthened that boat, and I think their training has gone well. Here's an interesting thought for you, Crossy, because I mentioned training. Almost all those oarsmen in the straight four, and at least 2/3 of the oarsmen in the eight, all have been coached by Mike Tatey.
Yeah,
those are Mike's guys. And when I got appointed the coach of the eight last year, Mike Tatey and I are very close friends, and I said, Mike, these are your guys. By all rights, you should be coaching them.
Yeah,
not me. But these are your people. You've developed them, and Crossy, no question, they go out there. These athletes go out to the CRC.
Yeah,
most of them with very low profiles. Coming out of programs like Drexel, or coming out of a program like Cornell, which has not been terribly fast for a while. And they train, they get fitter, their rowing is sound. And so Mike is, by my sort of point of view, is the guy that is their coach. Coming in as I did at the last moment.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's not really coaching, is it? I mean, it's I think at that level, yes, in a short period of time, how much impact can a coach have in, let's say, 2 or 3 months? Some, for sure, or a coach wouldn't do it. But it's what's happened over the months and years prior.
Yeah.
That really, that's where the foundation is set. And Mike Tatey, it's clear that's where they've trained. I mean, Nick Rusher, for example, went out there. He graduated from Yale.
Yeah.
He'd been in the national team 8 the year before. He was pretty worn out and sick last June. And Nick went out to CRC, had a heck of a time breaking 6 minutes.
Wow.
At Yale.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, and he is a very diligent guy. When he spends 3 or 4 months out there with Mike, and all of a sudden he's at 5:54.
No.
Yeah. And
wow.
So, but that's just the Rusher story. So what goes on there is critical to the success. And yeah, I think those, you didn't ask the question directly, but I think that 8 that's together now is a very good shot of making a very strong showing. The straight 4 has already done that. That's no guarantee, of course.
Yeah.
But in those 2 sweep events, on the men's side, that's where the U.S. stands, in that position.
So you can duck this question, Steve, because I don't know. There's probably politics involved in it. So why is Mike fallen out of favor as a coach for US rowing?
I really don't know. Mike is a very exuberant, spontaneous, and I find an absolutely effective coach. I think some people, in these modern times, or in these times, are leery of that. It's a tough question, and there are politics, without question. You can ask the same thing. It's a puzzle to me.
Yeah.
Why the fellow who coached, what was it, 3 gold medal winning women's 8s is not coaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't understand it.
Okay. Let's leave that to one side. Another question about coaching before we come, connected with the Olympics.
Mhm.
And again, it's probably unfair to ask you this, but I know Mike Callahan is working with the 8 now.
Yes.
What I'm trying to understand is how that fits in with things like the Pac-12 and the IRAs, which are kind of across the qualification regatta.
Mhm. I think it's a tough situation that Mike's in. Mike will do a very good job with that group. And again, understand, Crossy, it's a whole different kind of coaching. When you pick up a crew, what is it, 2 months before the Olympics? What would you call that? Yeah, it's a form of coaching. And Mike will do it well.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that at all. He's very capable, and the crews that he's coached in the past have demonstrated that. So balancing his University of Washington work with the national team work, that's tough. I think on one hand, if the boats are working side by side, it's a tremendous advantage for his university crew. Here they are, they're racing a crew that's most likely faster. But what a great incentive. It certainly posts absolutely no harm to the Olympic 8 at all, because they've got, they can get their juices going with another boat next to them. So, but it's a challenge. Mike Cady did it one year. I don't know if that was the Tokyo group. And I guess what I would say is, it would be good. This is so obvious. If there were coaches that coached these boats for year after year after year, as Tom Trahar did.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he coached it year after year after year. He was the genuine developer, supporter, coach of those boats. It would be great to have that kind of continuity in coaching on the men's side. It would be great if there was. I watch, for example, I've worked with the GB people so long, with Peter Shepard.
Yes.
They do such a brilliant job of staying in touch with, and as unusual as it sounds, they're constantly supporting, recruiting their athletes that are overseas. How great is that?
Yeah.
They're in touch with them. When they come back to UK, depending upon their level, they'll find a club for them that they can develop in that club. I wish that happened in this country. I get visitors from Great Britain, from Australia, from New Zealand. All these coaches come to the American universities, not just Yale, and they're in contact with their athletes. Gee, I don't think I've never seen a coach from U.S. rowing at the boathouse.
Wow.
Period.
Yeah, that is fascinating.
And there are people there to be recruited. So the outreach should be there.
Yeah.
Not just say deadlines for this. If you're interested, there's a deadline. You have to do this by this. But just cultivating these people.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be done, Crossy. The major university programs in this country are beautifully supported. The boathouses are of the highest standard. the people, what we call the boatman or the rigger of the highest standard,
yeah.
The financial support complete, meaning, in other words, travel, so forth and so on. And then they graduate. They're not sure who's their coach is going to be, right?
Yeah.
There's very little outreach. They just say, be here, be there, if you're interested. And, it seems to me there should be, more cultivation.
Yeah.
I can give you examples on the Yale squad. There's this youngster, I won't mention his name, this youngster who is going into his, now a junior, who's from the Boston area.
Yeah.
Who's a 5'48".
Whoa.
A terrific athlete.
Yeah.
Easily on the same level as Eloise and Digby. It's, he's been asked, would you like to, row this summer for the under 23s or whatever? But that's it. Nothing beyond that. No in-depth conversations and so forth. And so overall, I think we could do a much better job in cultivating relationships with having U.S. rowing, having people like Peter Shepard, whose one of his significant roles is the cultivation of young GB oarsmen, I guess from age, 17?
Yeah.
And 17 on. I mean, it's really well done. So, yeah.
Is it money? Is it just that US rowing don't have money, or is it just
it's money would be very helpful. That being said, this leads you into a whole nother area, Crossy. The money is there. Out of these universities have come people who have generated enormous wealth, right? I mean, for example, at Yale, which is not, you've got the names that are iconic names in industry in this country, the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, all these folks. And then, of course, in modern times, their equivalents. And yet there's been, over the years, it's not new, but there's been a real, how would you call it? Real frustration and disappointment on the part of a number of these people of significant influence and wealth. They don't feel as if they're heard. They don't feel as if their contributions to U.S. rowing. This is not new, by the way. This is not. This is not hammering the present administration. It's been that way for as long as I can remember. So they don't have any confidence in the leadership of U.S. rowing. So they move elsewhere. A perfect example, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. I don't think Sean would be angry with me, but Sean Colgan.
Yeah, he wouldn't, no.
He's supported the New Zealand team. He's now he's this primary sponsor for Leander and the regatta. That begs the question, why not U.S. rowing, Sean? You're an American citizen. And the answer to that is, and I'm not just, he's one of a number that over the years has felt as if the organization has not been well run. And in my opinion, it's only opinion, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And let me say again, I'm not singling out this present U.S. rowing administration. So the money could be there, but even under the circumstances where it's less funded, I think the outreach would play a huge role in upping upping the game. So yeah, sorry to go on such a tear.
No, okay.
Right.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you, because I think it's fascinating with sports coaches, and I'm thinking of incredible sports coaches like yourself, like Jurgen Grobler, like Mike Spracklin, like Harry Mahn. We mentioned Mike Tatey. And you are so revered. I mean, there was that lovely dinner, I think, at the World Championships last year, where a lot of the guys from Yale, I think it was on the Saturday night or something, came to, I guess, say thank you to you for, in terms of your retirement. So it's like you're revered. I think I called you legendary. How do you look at yourself, though? In what way do you look at yourself?
I mean, that's pretty easy, Martin. We know ourselves so well. And what we usually do, I think it's a human instinct, don't you think? We almost always reflect on what we feel are our weaknesses, our deficiencies, the bad decisions that we've made. I mean, I'm not being morbid but so I'll simply say this, is that I feel blessed to have found the work. I also feel very, very fortunate to have, I think, some what I would call instinctual and natural responses to interaction with people that I think plays a huge role.
Yeah.
And I'm in so many instances, and it's not just the athletes that represent their countries, but I'm in awe of these young men. Crossy, at an American university, most of them, the academic load, it's like Oxford and Cambridge. It's heavy. And it's amazing to me that they can do what they do with their team, their rowing, do what they do with their academic piece, and have a social life. And I look at them, and I look at them with great respect. And of course, over time, that develops into great affection. And over time, that grows into, using a word that most men, myself included, are uncomfortable with, it moves into the realm of love.
Yeah.
So I feel that. I feel that very profoundly. And I reflect on the people, from the very beginning. I reflect on, my first crew of Bill Titus, and I could just name so many of these people that I feel essentially in very real sense, that they're my sons, and I care for them enormously. And that's not being maudlin. That's not being, I'm a direct coach, which means I endeavor to tell the truth about what's wanted and needed to go fast. So it's not as if I'm coddling people. I don't do that. I don't do that because it wouldn't help them develop into racers. But I think most of the people that I've coached know that it runs deep. And I just feel blessed to have that instinct. And and it's how would you call it? That instinct of being able to relate and guide and support.
If you looked at a younger version of yourself, I don't know how far back this relevant, because I was looking. I think I read that your dad was a famous radio announcer. I don't know about your mum, but if you could look back at your younger self, what could you see in terms of your upbringing or your qualities that made you suited for this role that you've been so great at over the years?
Let me think. I was always drawn to. I mean, as a little boy, I think most boys, when you play, I was drawn to sort of the little band of brothers thing, whether it was playing in the woods,
Yeah.
whether it was playing, little war games or playing pickup sports, as we call it. I was always drawn to that for sure. And why was it that way? I'm not sure. My father and I were not close. I was very close to my mother. She was a very athletic person, a very strong-willed person, and yeah, I don't know, but it became clear that I was elected captain of my football team when I was at Kent. I always was drawn to the group endeavor, the band of brothers.
Yeah.
I always felt, and to this day, maybe it's right. I don't know if it's the right word, wrong word. I just think there's something just absolutely pure and noble about an endeavor that's so distinct, that requires so much of the people, and in terms of emotional durability. You watch and you cultivate. You watch people come together. But that's not really answering your question. I don't know. It's
No.
it's in the genes. But I had no idea, Crossy, that I was going to coach. I didn't know really what I was going to do. I was never drawn in any way to what we would call business or the commercial world.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I didn't have any contempt for it. I just wasn't drawn to it. I was. Yeah. Post World War II, maybe there's something that I watched uncles come back from the war, and they were friggin' heroes to me. They were heroes.
Yeah.
One was a fighter pilot. Another one was in Patton's group, and they were heroes. And I thought, sort of, men should be heroes. as naive as that is, but I felt that to be the case. And then, so along comes sport, right? And in sport, there's a parallel to war. Thank God nobody dies on the beach when you lose a race or that kind of thing. But there's a parallel to it. It's a contest. Something is being contested, right?
Yeah.
It's between a starting line and a finish line. And it's the strength and the thoroughness of the preparation that goes into performance. There's something just pure and noble in my mind about that. Right?
Yeah.
And I've always been drawn to that concept. Band of brothers. And that might be childish. It might be naive, but it was in my soul and remains there.
Wow.
So
that's pretty cool. I was watching something where and we've kind of touched on this before. We talked about Sholto and why he was a good recruit for you, and you kind of said, look, biomechanics or training programs, obviously they're important.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah. And there was a but it was about attitude, mindset, which. And so, what could you say about that?
Well, I think you've just said it. It's look, Martin. In our time, we've seen all different training programs put forward. In the beginning with you, it was, in my beginnings, it was all about Carl Adam and Rotsburg.
Yeah.
Interval training. And you had Janacek came to Great Britain with that basic concept. So that's a type of training. I guess the Danes still do that. Then with the advent of the East German ascendancy, it was mileage, and of course drug, which we knew was taking place, which I could never, by the way, as an aside, I could never put that aside when I thought of the coaches that participated in that process. But that's aside. And then we come to Tor Nielsen. Then we come to Rusty Robinson in New Zealand. Then we come to, we go on and on and on, and whatever's in vogue at the time. Dick Tonks, what's all these things. So when people say, "Oh, it's the program, it is a training program," and I say to myself, using an American expression, I said, there's so many ways of skinning the cat. There are ways of developing physiologically that will prepare you for a 2,000 meter or 5.5 minute contest. My guide in that, by the way, other than intuitive stuff, was Dr. Fritz Hegerman.
I knew Fritz. Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't we love him? Yeah.
Yeah.
Gone too early. And Fritz would always remind me when we were doing this mileage piece, he'd always remind me, said, "Steve, you're not training them for a marathon." But whatever it is. So training programs, yes. There are a variety of ways of preparing people physiologically for this particular contest. Then you've got the mechanics of the stroke. There seem to be two basic patterns that work, work successfully. It is a sport of leverage, I think, so basically using as much as the track as you can. So use of the legs are optimized. If the legs are optimized, then you've got the oppositional force with the core. But you see, some people do the drive pry. Some people, like the Germans, were very successful with a simultaneous drive and opening. So those things are important. It's important to do those well. Blade work is very, very important. I wouldn't diminish that one iota. However, you go to these rowing clinics, and it's endless good information in those areas. And the key piece is rarely addressed. The key piece is the psychological piece, and that is the ability to draw people to a common goal, support them moving forward, and essentially having them develop the confidence in themselves and their mates that will carry them into speed on the race course. And you brought this up. I think there's one individual who I wish I'd known, but it was that I think had a profound impact on my thinking and coaching, and that's Steve Fairbairn.
Oh, wow.
Without question. Without question. And not so much the mechanics that he put forward, but the psychology. I think one of his quotes is, "Once I've taught the oarsman to coach himself, I know my job is done."
It's done. Yeah.
You remember that quote?
Yeah, I do.
Come on, you're an Olympic medalist. Is that true?
Yeah. From my perspective, completely. You want to make yourself redundant as a coach in as many ways as you can.
Absolutely. It's their game, their ownership. You're a guide. But as I've said, each one of these, universities I've gone to, I've said this, is that they can trust the basic training modalities that we use. They can trust the basic progression through the academic year, and they can trust the teaching of the biomechanics of the stroke. In other words, you can be okay with that. But I said, none of that will make you fast on the race course unless you truly understand that it's your game, that what you give is what you'll get in return. And if you all witness, I was saying this to a group, each other endeavoring to bring it daily, you will really work and you will be devoted to each other, not by what you say, but by the observation of what you do.
Yeah.
So the whole piece, Martin, that's the secret sauce. The secret sauce is not the training, no, not the training. It's the program. You do my program and you will be fast, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. If it was that simple, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the secret sauce.
Yeah.
It's just what you said. It's when the athletes understand it's their game, and it's their devotion and love to that game, or that's not a game, to the race, and they'll be fast. And if they get that message, and if they sense that they're trusted, they'll go through a wall. They'll go head first through a wall. The dictatorial, do this, do that, intimidation, do this, do that, intimidation. Yes, some of that works short term. It can work, but it's not truly the most effective way to proceed. By the way, these are just my thoughts.
Yeah. Want to take a little tangent. People write in with questions sometimes, and this guy who I don't know who's listening is down as Lord Major. So I don't know if he's talking. I guess he must be talking from experience. That you do see in terms of lineup and boat placements. How do you manage powerful, strong rowers who make boats fast but have negative personalities in the boat? So I'm guessing we can think of rowers like that. You know, I think maybe at one time Mike Spracklin might have thought I was a negative personality because I was so argumentative. But
hey, by the way, Crossy, I'll bet you were the early version of Schulte Carnegie.
Oh, I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you.
I mean, Schulte wasn't argumentative, but Schulte could not bear to have a bow in front of his.
No, I know. Yeah.
And I have a sense, Crossy, you were the same way.
Yeah. Particularly, how would you like to take that question on?
Sure. A negative personality. If that person over time can't come to an understanding that what he projects hurts his mates, hurts meaning encumbers them, makes that job, their job more difficult, that person has to be removed from the group.
Yeah.
But it's over time. In other words, you have to work with that personality or that person, and with a sense of understanding, you have to work with them, if, as I said a moment ago. But over time, if they're disruptive, a coach's job is to put together, when it comes to racing, put together the fastest people.
Yeah.
Period. That's it. And if somebody is disruptive of that process, well, they can't be in the boat. That's all there is to it. And we all have experiences where we've had to do that move somebody, let's say, out of the first boat. And yeah, it's very unpleasant. It's wrenching. And yeah, it's all that. But
Yeah.
that's part of coaching.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And thanks for the answer. One thing I thought, this is an impossible question, but I'm kind of going to ask it and just see what you do with it. Sometimes I like to make up fantasy crews of, like which is the best rower,
Right,
which
right,
is the best eight.
right.
How far along the line, if you had to make up a fantasy eight of people that you've coached at different universities, who
Right.
who would be ballpark stand a chance of getting in it?
God, I could make a lot of people really upset.
Yeah, you could. That's why I say I don't know what you're going to do with it.
Let me say this, that the breakthrough eights that I've coached, the 1993-94 eights at Brown,
Yeah.
They raised the standard to a whole different level. They were distinguished considerably faster than their competition. And there were people in that eight, for example, in the middle of the boat was Jamie Coven,
Yeah.
and our good buddy Zeno Mueller.
Oh, Zeno, yeah.
And in the 7th seat was Igor Barashko, who was a great oarsman. But there's so many of them. Recent times, just in terms of talent, people are very talented. There are people that I've coached that were not as talented as others, but what they brought to the boat, they brought out the best in their mates. A person like Robbie Hearn, an Australian that was part of the breakthrough cruise at Yale. He rowed in I think he was captain of one of the Cambridge boats.
Yeah.
But Robbie, by force of personality, always brought out the best. You'd have to put Charlie Elways in that group. Tom developed Digby.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom will tell you this, early on in his career, even through most of his years at Yale, he's always been powerful, but he had to learn.
Yeah.
He had to learn the touch and feel of a boat. Oh my goodness.
Who's the best stroke you've ever had?
Okay, that's a good question. I think the best stroke might very well have been, it might have been Nito Simonson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Nito, he was in a tough situation because there weren't enough oarsmen in Norway. You had Tufte was the single sculler.
Mm-hmm.
And Nito was right on his back, right up his butt. I mean, he was close. But there was nobody in a double. So Nito never got international recognition. But he stroked a boat at Cal, obviously, in fast conditions, that went 5:23.6.
Whoa.
Right? So, and fast times come in fast conditions. But that's,
yeah.
He did that. I'd say he was really, really quite remarkable. And I think it's really so sad that his career was so interrupted. I would say that Dan Williamson, stroking the 2019 Yale boat.
Yeah.
God, he was good.
Wow.
He was frail. He was young. He was frail, but he was very, very good. And unfortunately, went into the program in New Zealand and just got broken. He was limping into the finals. He was in and out of the eight, that won the gold medal, and he was never the same when he came back. And he's still, Crossy, he's still in recovery. He's in the New Zealand pair. Yeah, no, he's not 100%. But but those guys, but there's so many in that group of people. But the other, yeah, I'd say Nito. I'd say Dan Williamson. Those guys were awfully good, and there were plenty of others that were really good. I mean, Sholto stroked an 8 that won all the races. Stefan Riemenkosten, that little Stefan, who the Germans would never look at him because he couldn't break 6 minutes. What a shame! But he was a terrific stroke. Yeah.
Best bowman.
Best bowman. I would say, let's say bow pair. Overall effect on a boat, I think probably I'd say probably Robbie Hearn.
Oh, really?
When Robbie Hearn was healthy, he was really a good bowman. I think Sholto probably is the best bowman in the world right now.
yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean, he'd be great. But yeah, the bow seat is an interesting one. It's clearly it's a seat that facilitates, like the stroke seat, a lightness and a quickness in the boat, and it's yeah.
We've got another question from Malta Sturmacher. Thanks for watching, Malta, which we kind of touched on anyway, but he's obviously taken the time and trouble to write it. I think you've kind of put this together, but through stuff we talked about. But maybe you could address this question.
What do you think?
I think it's the biggest difference between coaching a national squad and a university crew, and how have you approached coaching the US men's 8?
The question is this: if the coach has time, and time I mean months and years, working with a group, then the coach can have a real impact on what goes on. If a coach has got 7 weeks, 8 weeks, you can be a good guide, and you can affect and refine some elements of the stroke, but it's very different. I don't think it's different with the athletes. The athletes that first national team boat that I coached was in 1973.
You're kidding?
No.
For
US.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think where it was a year after
it was in Moscow.
Moscow, yeah, with the unfair course.
Yes.
Yeah.
We set the course record in the heat. And then, of course, back in those days, Crossy, in lane 1 were the Russians, lane 2 are the East Germans, and then out in 5 and 6 were the U.S. and Great Britain and New Zealand. But no, I think I think relationships with the athletes, the cultivation and promotion of confidence, trust between athletes, I think it's all the same. And I think what exists, as I know it in Great Britain, where there's continuity year after year after year, the coach is going to have a huge impact on the crew. As is the university, we have 4 years. But it's all the same. It's the ability to reach, support, guide the athletes in their development, and having them understand it's their game.
Yeah. What do you make of the current season at the university level? Princeton, I think they're unbeaten so far. I'm interested to try and understand why. Harvard have beaten Washington. Washington beat Cal. What's it from your perspective?
It's that opening race down in Sarasota. It's interesting, but it's rarely a predictor of these early races. We used to go out to the San Diego Crew Classic when I was at Yale. We did that 4 times. We won twice, we lost twice, and I think the years that we lost, we won the championships. Of the years, so I think to some extent you have to sort of take those early races out of the equation and look at what's transpired. And Princeton on the East Coast has beaten all the people they've raced, and they've beaten them by pretty substantial margins. Beat Harvard, I think, by 2.5 seconds. Beat Yale on a bad course, but by I think about 4 seconds. So Princeton's a very, very good crew. I've watched them on video.
Yeah,
they've got excellent base speed. They're not particularly fast in the first 400 or 500 meters, which is okay. They're in the race, but they're not fast. But they're very, very strong through the body of the race, and they're very disciplined. I think it would always be a mistake to discount Cal and Washington. They have very deep squads, so the likelihood of Washington, the Washington boat that raced in Sarasota, it's highly likely that's not the same Washington crew that's rowing now. So there's difference in personnel. I think with Yale, I think there's been sort of the process of finding the right lineup, and that's been ongoing, as I understand it. And I'm not there on anywhere close to a daily basis, but finding the right man to stroke that particular crew. But the rankings as they are now, they're valid. Then I think there are a bunch of crews, 2 or 3 crews like Northeastern and Brown that are strong, and Syracuse are strong. But I think the top people are the ones that will most likely, not necessarily, would be Washington and California and Princeton and Washington, at Washington, Cal, as 5, and of course Harvard. And of course, Harvard. So Harvard always, Crossy, Harvard always has good people. I mean, all you have to do is look at where, the medals they've won in the under 23s. Right? Yeah. So they always have good people. They've got good people now, and so they can always be fast. But it's a year where the only crew that has sort of been overall had the most distinction is Princeton. Yeah.
Cam Kilty, who's a regular watcher to Crossy's Corner. Sorry it's taken so long to get to your question, Cam, which I thought we could, because I mean, I know now that you commentated on our race in the Los Angeles Olympics.
I sure did.
Which we can talk about that a bit.
Coming through the mist, right?
Yeah, through the mist. That was it. It was quite a contraption that you were commentating from, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was up on that high tower.
What was it like watching the Olympic races from that?
It was. I think it was probably the most beautiful, hospitable rowing venue, other than Henley, that I've ever seen, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It looked like a medieval jousting. Setup. And it's in this beautiful part of California, up in the hills. But yeah, the tower. Was I in a tower? Yeah, I guess it was fun. It was intriguing. And just the overall scene was very, very very, very, very nice, very good, very helpful.
Yeah. There was only one US gold medal, was there, on that on that finals day from the double? Have I got that right?
Yeah, that was the double won a gold. I think the boats that raced you won the gold.
Yeah.
Wasn't the US second?
Yeah, they rowed beautifully. That crew,
Yeah, they did.
they were rowing better than we were, and we kind of out sprinted or powered them
Yeah.
in the end of the race. But yeah, they got the silver, and then the US 8 was the big thing. That was Chris Korzanowski's 8, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was his debut with it, and they were a fast crew. The couple of guys, one guy, two guys, bumbled the start. They actually washed out. And the Canadians were gone. I think New Zealand was the favorite to win that.
Yeah.
That was Harry Mann's boats.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and that's another. I'm not trying to plug people, but that's another guy that had an enormously positive effect on U.S. rowing was Chris Korzanowski.
Really?
Oh yeah, he really did. When he was national team coach, he was traveling to every single university boathouse. He was there. He was putting out training programs. He was coaching coaches. His record was pretty spectacular. And circling back to the opening comments, if we had more of that today, I think would be fast. But Corzo knew his stuff, and does to the present time. He's a tough dude, very tough guy. He's had health problems and he's worked through them. And I have enormous admiration for Chris. I learned a lot from Chris.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So do you have any desire to commentate again, is what Cam was asking, I guess?
Yeah, I would do that if asked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd do that if asked. But that's not going to happen. It doesn't break my heart. But I just look forward to the racing at the Olympics. I look forward to listening to you. You bring. This is probably not a politic thing to say, but you bring much more of what I view as sort of the American excitement commentary rather than sort of the bland European.
Yeah. Thank you.
You bring real juice to it.
Who are you looking forward to seeing racing the Olympics then? In terms of crews.
I think it'll come down to all my guys. I mean, the pairs race be very, very interesting. The eights race will be very interesting. I think this is that the British 8 is obviously cohesive, experienced, deliberate, and calm. But boy, they're going to be people that are just really after it.
Yeah.
If the Dutch can make a commitment to speed just a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
They seem to wait too long. Ever since 1996, last time they won, their rowing is impeccable. In my opinion, I think they row very, very well.
Yeah.
You saw them last summer. They're giants.
Yeah.
Remember the hotel? They were eating at the same place.
Yeah.
My God. Yeah, they look like a whole boat full of Charlie Elways, right? They could do some damage. The US 8 clearly, if they were 4.5 seconds behind last year, and I'm sure what they would consider that was not exactly exemplary of where they were, but even if it was, I think the additions to that boat and also the mindset of really having something to prove I think that could make them dangerous. Supposedly the Aussies have abandoned the straight four and just put all their guys in the.
So that's I think Mark Prater is a fantastic coach who runs that 8, and I think if he can integrate, so the style of the 4, like last year, it was very odd the way they were rowing, but
Yeah.
It wasn't like the 8. But if he can integrate those guys,
Right.
I don't think they'll beat the British at Lucerne, but you know, if they have a race, if they go to the third World Cup, I think the Romanians will go there. Then you know, it could be close at the Olympics.
Oh, I think it will be. I think that 8th race will be very close. And that's an interesting point in itself, Crossy, that isn't it interesting that the 8s just haven't gotten any faster over the last 15 or 20 years?
Yeah, yeah.
They really haven't. And that speaks to all the different kinds of training programs, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting. Who knows when that will happen?
Are there any other crews that you are excited to see outside of your guys?
As I said, the 8s, the pairs, those are the ones. The straight four. It's interesting. The straight four. Isn't that somewhat anonymous out of Great Britain? We don't hear who are the guys in the British straight four.
Yeah. So
do they get any attention? Does anybody talk about them?
So no.
They're anonymous.
They came into the team, so they were kind of in the Project Paris group. They did World Cup 3, some of them in 21. Freddie Davison, he wanted to go to the US, but I don't think it worked out. So he went to Cambridge. He's like from St. Paul's, as is Dave Ambler in the 2 seat.
Ambler went, I think.
Yeah. The guy in the 3 seats is like he's like a real unit. You know, he basically comes from coastal rowing,
right?
And you know, he's come into the team, and he's made you know, he anchors that boat from the 3 seat. He allows Freddie Davison to do what he's doing. Matthew Aldridge. And then the guy up in the bows is like, he's come from, you know, Liverpool University. He used to be a swimmer. And they just put them together, and they just went really well. But you know, it used to be with the British 4 that you could have, the public would tell you, like, pretty much they would say, well, Redgrave and Princeton are in it, or Cracknell is in it, but now nobody would know the names of those guys.
I know that interests me, and yet they've been, in this past cycle, they've been as distinguished at World Cups as you can get. They've won.
Yeah.
You know, so the US straight 4 is very interesting. Again, those are all Mike Taty's guys, and I watched them develop from a distance last summer, and what they did, consciously or unconsciously, they matched the stroke man. You've seen them row, correct?
Yeah.
And it's very upright, kind of piece to it, and they matched him, so they have this unity. In other words, they're uniform. The impulse is uniform, and they're very, very, particularly the stroke man. Well, they all are, but the stroke man particularly. Liam Corrigan, I would have loved to have had him at Yale, but he went to Harvard. But he is very aggressive, very strong, and he's the driving force in that boat. And there are very good people behind him that have the same characteristics. So although it's not a conventional application, their physiology and their mentality is very strong. So whether they're maintaining that this year, I really don't know. But I don't know. They were a couple of seconds behind the British?
Yeah. Just on the length. Yeah. I wanted to, I mean, two questions. You must have told lots of people this, but you're obviously, very involved with stuff you're doing now. I know it's difficult, the transition. We were talking before we went live on air, but I know you do some consulting in different places, which must be quite interesting. Why did you retire? Presumably you had more. You could have been coaching.
Oh yeah, no question about it, Martin. I mean, I've not, that fire burns bright and always will. And it's interesting. I didn't notice it until much later in my career. I seem to have about a 12-year span of being at a program, sort of, if you will, building it to a championship level, and then feeling the need to move on. I mean, that certainly the case. At Brown, the last two crews, 93, 94, they were all unbeaten. It was nothing about that, but it was looking, I think, for a new project, and without over dramatizing it, I think two things. One, I think I'm drawn to, how would you call it? I think I'm drawn to risk to some extent, putting yourself into a position of uncertainty, and then being able to, how would you acclimatize to that and work through it. And I think the other parallel, which might be an over dramatization, serious mountaineers, they find a mountain, they climb it a particular route. Now, what do? They don't keep climbing the same route. They look for a more difficult route on the same mountain. And I think there's something that I'm semi-conscious of in my own temperament that looks for that. Because I can remember, these statements are self-serving statements. I can remember going out to Cal the first time around, right at the same time as the Munich Olympics, and that was in chaos and so forth. The tear gas everywhere. The anti-war demonstrations, and getting that program up and going, and then it seems to be there's a draw to that, and it's still there. Yale, we finished strong last year. We won the Eastern Sprints for the 7th time, and the Yale Harvard race didn't have a great IRA, but and the plan for next year, Martin, is I'm back at my old school, and I'll see if
is that Kent.
That's Kent.
Yeah.
That Kent has a long history with Henley. I'm not sure if you're aware. It was the first American schoolboy crew that ever raced at Henley.
You're kidding?
Yeah.
Really?
Right. Yeah. And it was
what, in the 60s or 70s are we talking now?
We're talking about, God, I don't know when it was. I think it was in the 1920s.
Oh, so they didn't race, because the Princess Elizabeth, I was thinking they were in that, but they went into like something.
When I rode at Kent, we went into the Thames Cup.
Thames Cup, yeah.
The PE was closed.
Yeah,
that was just a British schoolboy deal. So coming back here, it'll be being part of a community, I thrive. I thrive on interaction, thoughts, friendship, all those things, common cause, and I miss that very much when you're coaching at an American university. You have that, and I miss that. And so here I am. That's where I am right now. I'm up at Kent, and yeah, I'm on the board of trustees there, and I'll be off the board once I become an employee. So
yeah,
all I have to do is convince my wife to join me, but I don't think I can. So I'll be a weekend husband.
Yeah, that's really. I've been married 30. Is it 35 years this year? And yeah, Chris isn't a particular fan of rowing.
No, nor is Daria, which is great, Crossy. We're blessed. You didn't go home and get drilled on what happened in practice today, and I never asked from Daria at all.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. But so we take it as it comes.
I'm just wondering if there's anything that we could touch on that we haven't touched on, Steve.
Right now in the present, I can't think of anything other than I'll speak for myself. It's sort of God, Crossy, we've been blessed.
Yeah.
Right. We found a passion early on, and we've been able to engage and nurture in various forms, in that passion. And you don't want it to stop. I don't want it to stop. And we'll keep it going. This summer, plugging Luke Walton, who was an oarsman at Cal, who rowed in the Olympics as well in a pair. Luke Walton and I have put together a clinic up at Kent this summer.
Wow.
And 3.5 days. Now I've watched these sort of summer camps that they put out here in the States, and you get a horde of kids there and they just mill them through. But this, I purposely don't call it a camp. I call it a clinic. It's going to be maximum 20 people.
Yeah.
5 coaches. It'll be 2 women's 8, men's 8, and just really in depth the things we've talked about, the psychology of team, how to progress, boom, 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 as well as the mechanics of the stroke, but more the whole psychology of training, how to bring things forward. So I'd like that camp to be a success, and I hope we can fill it out. No, I think it's all good. Can you think of anything?
No,
we're all done.
I think it's great. I think we'll end the live part of this interview now. I think we've gone to places that Crossy's Corner, touched on a bit barely, but I think we've delved beautifully into the sport of rowing and the magical attraction.
Good.
It has. So I'd just say that's just been amazing. Such a pleasure to spend that time with you, Steve.
Yeah, and Crossy, the same. I know our paths have been sometimes parallel and so forth. And, of course, the announcing that I love the best is 2015 at Henley in the finals of the ladies' plate.
Oh, yeah. I enjoyed that one.
Right. Yeah. So did I.
I enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's end the live part of this interview now then. Thank you, Steve.
Okay. All the best. Okay. Bye-bye.